Welcome back to Pull the Receipts. Today's story comes from Reddit's rpettyrevenge. Okay, so, as a teenager, I worked on an island at a grocery store as the store receiver. Technically, I was the night receiver, but I worked 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and was in charge of receiving the most important truck of the day. My job was to get it unloaded, all our garbage and returns and extra pallets and cardboard loaded, and then get it back out the door in time for it to drive halfway around the island and catch the same ferry it had come on before it left. So, time was of the absolute essence. The island was a pretty chill place in the winter, but in the summer, it became a rich man's playground. We often got people parking in our loading bay, so 30 minutes before the truck arrived, I always put out 3-foot-tall cones. One day, a lady in a red convertible decided to push aside one of the cones and park directly in our loading bay. I saw her do it and ran out after her, telling her to move. She refused and went into the store anyway, claiming, "I know Danny, the store owner, and he said it was fine." Well, I also knew Danny, and I knew he hadn't said it was fine. After making repeated announcements and instructing all the cashiers not to let her check out and pay until she moved the car, she came fuming out and moved it. The next morning, Danny, the store owner, asked me what had happened. I told him exactly what I had done, as the truck was on its way. He told me that was fine, and he would speak to her. Surprise, surprise, she did in fact know Danny, but he hadn't given her permission to park in our dock. He did ask me not to tow her car, as she was his neighbor, but he said since it was a convertible, he didn't see why we couldn't pull her e-brake and push it out of the way. Which, sure enough, is exactly what we did a week later, when she again parked between my cones. And then, facing the loading bay door, where I was giving her a clear look, she flipped me off. So I went inside and got a couple of other grocery guys. After releasing the handbrake on her little red convertible, we just pushed it straight across the parking lot. It barely gave enough room for our truck to get in, and she was completely blocked in for 30 minutes while I unloaded it. She actually came into the back of the store as I was unloading trucks, and in order to stop a pallet from hitting her, the loading bay was at a wicked angle. I had to jam my foot under the pallet jack wheels, causing it to jump over my steel toes and land on my foot. I screamed at her to get out of my loading bay, and she was so shocked she actually did. Well, the next afternoon, when I came in to get some things I needed to finish reporting, which I could do from home as my shift manager had already approved a couple days off to heal my foot, Danny didn't know any of this yet. He had just arrived and immediately asked to speak to me. I had already been to the hospital and filled out my workers' comp forms about the injury. Fortunately, my foot wasn't broken, but it was extremely badly bruised. Danny, who was actually a really decent boss, said he had a complaint from a customer about me screaming and swearing at them, and he wanted to know my side of the story. I asked if it was the same lady with the red car, and he confirmed it was, which to him confirmed that I had in fact screamed at her. I then asked him if he had seen the security tapes from the dock. There were several cameras. He hadn't, so I told him that until he had watched the tapes, I didn't want to say anything. In front of me, he pulled up the tape. He saw me on the dock, asking the lady not to park there. He saw her flip me off and leave the car anyway. A few minutes later, he saw me push her car with the car grocery clerks, and then he saw how it was blocked by our truck. Switching to the inside cameras, he saw how she pushed right past the employee-only doors and barged into the loading bay, and how I had used my own foot to stop her from being smashed by the pallet of milk I was whizzing down the loading bay. I literally saved her life with my foot. You couldn't see my foot or what stopped the pallet jack, but by then I had my shoe and sock off, and Danny only took one look at my bruised foot to understand the cause for my rather loud yelling that was being shown on the screen. Funny how the red car lady forgot to mention all these things when she was complaining to him. Danny said if she ever parked in the loading bay again, I was to call a tow truck immediately, regardless of the time of day. He knew full well that I could have had a much more serious injury because of this lady, and even after having an entire pallet of milk on my foot, and admittedly screaming at her to get out of the loading bay, I hadn't in fact even sworn at her. And if I wanted to, I could have used the injury to get a lot more time off work, costing the business a lot of money, instead of just the 2 days I really did need to feel like I could walk again. Well, the next week came and went, and sure enough, that Friday afternoon, who pulls up and parks? Not in the loading bay itself, but in front of the dumpster beside the loading bay, still effectively blocking our truck from making the wide turn to get into the bay. Sure, there were no cones there, but I was done. I didn't even say anything to her as she flipped me off again, like she thought she'd won somehow. I called a tow truck, but sadly, they were on an accident and couldn't come for an hour. So I grabbed the produce guy and a grocery guy. This time, we were unable to push her car, as she had put the top onto it and rolled the windows up. I didn't care. I just took the pallet jack and had the produce guy drag out a few pallets. I put a pallet under her car, and using the pallet jack, lifted and moved her car all the way across the parking lot, and then dropped it onto a stack of 2 more pallets. Her tires weren't even on the ground. I just left her like that, and then told the tow truck where her car was when he had time. To her credit, she didn't come into my back end screaming like last time, but the screaming was loud enough that one of the managers called Danny. He came down to the store, and without even talking to me, he just backed me and banned her from the store. I guess she wasn't as good a friend as she thought. Petty? Yes. Rewarding? Definitely. Danny actually gave me a 10-cent raise right after that, and never told me I did anything wrong, so I guess even he thought she had crossed a line. That's it for today. Drop a comment with your verdict below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story.